And we're live.
Awesome.
Aiden, what's up, man?
Um, Not too much. I've been spending a lot of time inside this year, so that's as many of us have, I'm
Yeah.
sure. How about you? Yeah, how are you holding up?
Doing okay, man. It's strange times, and they just keep getting stranger. It's like every time I sit down and record this podcast, I'm like, man, things just keep getting strange. They can't get much stranger than this. And then, the
Yeah.
sun gets blocked out by smoke from the West Coast. So then I'm like, okay, I guess it can keep getting weirder.
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
in.
sorry, one sec.
Oh, no problem.
Anyway, so you were about to ask something, yeah.
Yes, you're. So you're in California, right?
Yeah. So I moved down to Southern California, like in the Los Angeles County area, actually in September of last year. So it actually became a year, like a couple weeks ago.
Nice. And you moved there from Northern California, right?
No, moved from Seattle. I lived in
Seattle.
Seattle
Okay.
for 4 years before this. Yeah.
Awesome.
So kind of moved around like quite a bit. I was in like Seattle for 4 years before this, for school and like just worked there for a while. And before that, I lived for like most of like my high school and like middle school time. I lived on like this tiny border town in Washington. I
Mm-hmm.
basically lived in like the northwest corner of Washington. So like when I got into Melee, I was like kind of like half BC Smash, half Washington Smash because I was like on the border between the two areas, and I would go to like Vancouver for tournaments and Bellingham, Washington for tournaments. So I kind of like that's where I like got into the game, and then yeah, moved down to Seattle, and that's kind of like where like school and career stuff started to pick up, I guess.
Yeah, and that was when we met. I'm trying to. What year did we meet?
We met at what, the SmashGG house at Evo 2017, I think.
Yeah, like
17.
we'd interacted a lot before that, like just tossing
Yeah.
ideas back and forth as TOs. But I think for one of the first times we actually met was at the Smash GG house. Yeah, in 2017.
Yeah, I think we probably got introduced to each other, or at least like communicated initially with each other at uh it definitely would have been through like a Smash GG support chat. I remember the SAK gaming like support chat. But before that, dare I say it, hard, admittedly, in retrospect, hard for me to remember that night. But the hotel suite at Evo 2015. I was like,
Yes.
I was pretty intoxicated, but I think I may have met you that night. I met a lot of people that night.
Yeah. I mean, when we hung out at the Smash GG house, we were both pretty intoxicated as well. So it's like,
Yes, that's. I mean, there's a common theme of like being at Evo and being in Vegas and
yeah,
drinking a lot. I think that's like part of the standard. So
yeah, or even being at tournaments in general, but especially as a TO
yes,
when you go to kind of hang out with like a lot of the other TOs, everyone's just like, we gotta blow off steam.
yeah. Everybody wants to like shoot the shit and like complain about the same things
Totally.
and go over that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So when did you actually get into Melee, and how did you like, so it's funny, so we've known each other for a long time, but we actually haven't talked a ton. So there's a lot I'm like
Yeah.
interested to know about you, because you've obviously like become a very influential figure in the Melee scene and the Smash scene in general. Now you're working with BTS, you're making huge moves there, which is awesome. So how did you get into Smash originally?
So I got into it at the end of 2013. I think in November 2013 was like when, if you go look at like my Smashboards account creation date, that's like when it is, or it's like a little before that basically. And I had been playing, I've always been like a really competitive person. Like I loved like competing in sports. Like I was ultra competitive in like school. Uh, and I played like any multiplayer video game I was allowed to play from my parents. Like I would get really competitive about. So as somebody who had parents who like didn't let him play M-rated games,
Mm,
I wasn't playing Call of Duty and Halo. I basically latched onto any online title I could, which I think at the time I played competitive Mario Kart Wii, which still has a pretty large scene. But I played competitive Mario Kart Wii for years online. And
yeah.
I think towards the end of 2013 was when I was starting to kind of like phase out and get like pretty bored of that game. Um, and then kind of coincidentally, I remember that summer Evo 2013 was on, and I watched one set because a friend like linked it on Skype, and I ended up watching Mango versus Ice at the beginning of top 8. And I didn't really think anything of it because I didn't really have this like associated nostalgia with Melee like a lot of people, because similarly as I couldn't play M-rated games, before I was 13, I was not allowed to play teen-rated games in my house. And Melee is a teen-rated game. If
Yes.
for those who don't have blocked that out of their mind, because of course like it's Mario and Peach fighting each other, so it's not actually that big of a deal. But my mom just looked at the ratings and made her calls based on that. So I never owned that game. And then a few months later I was on YouTube, and in my YouTube recommended feed, like on my homepage, was an episode of the Smash documentary, and I just clicked on it because it was like, oh, does this have to do with Smash Brothers? And I think also that year I had like found out that PM existed, and I had downloaded and installed PM just because I was like generally interested in Wii modding, because that was a big part of the Mario Kart community, and it just seemed cool. And it was like PM was just this thing me and my friends played casually when they came over. And then I watched the doc, and I was like instantly intrigued. I was like, wow, this is so cool. And instantly like hopped onto Smash boards and like started like practicing tech. And then I think in December of 2013, the first tournament I technically ever went to was a tournament I ran myself. So I decided to host a tournament at the library, and just to get like as many friends as I could to show up. And I ended up getting 28 people to come,
Damn.
none of who actually played the game like competitively or seriously. They were just all people who like were down to show up and play. So it's like a 28-person tournament for Melee and PM. We had 2 games. We had 4 setups, 2 for each game. Tournament took way longer than it needed to for 30 people, but obviously I did not know about tournament logistics. And dude, it just kind of took off from there. Like I started posting on Smashboards. That introduced me to the Facebook group, got involved in the Facebook group, started going to fests, and yeah, that was just like kind of it. So like from age 16 and onwards, I was just like playing PM and playing Melee, and then eventually pretty much just Melee.
Nice. Okay, quick pause, hold on.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
My son is at it again. Only on podcast nights, man.
That's fine, man. Being a father is a huge, like a next level of responsibility. So I have unlimited respect for that.
Yeah, it's crazy. But the dog came into my office, so I had to go close the door again. So, thankfully, the wife is here tonight, so she can help with him. So why did you decide? Well, okay. So how old were you at this time? So you said about 2013. How old are you now?
I'm 23 now.
Okay, so you were like 18, right? No, you were younger than that. 16.
I was 16. I was like halfway through. I was just starting my junior year of high school and technically my first year of college when I got into Smash. So
how did that work? Just 'cause like dual enrollment, or?
Yeah. Like Washington State has this program called Running Start where you can, instead of your like just doing high school classes, you can start going to community college in place of high school classes. So I didn't drop out of high school. Like I still got my diploma, but basically like I stopped taking high school classes altogether and I just started going to the local college instead. And yeah, so it was like this like fusion thing where I'm starting my 3rd year of high school, but I also ended up starting my 1st year of college, which coincidentally like gave me way more accessibility to the Melee scene. It wasn't a decision made with that in mind, but it actually like worked out that way. Which
I mean,
really
if you end up on a college campus, there's a lot more opportunity to play for sure.
Exactly.
So what drove you to host your first tournament then?
I think just like instilled within me is this like desire to get people together to do things. Like I was definitely always the person in my friend groups to like get people together and like go get something done or go like out and do something together.
Yeah.
So and in online communities prior to that, like I had experience like organizing small things or attempting to get involved in organization. Like it's just kind of like, it sounds kind of cheesy, but I think it's just like who I am.
Yeah.
And even from when I was like really young. So it's just like a natural progression of like this seems really cool. I don't know where the tournaments are. I will just make one.
Yep.
And that was kind of the way of going about it. And it worked out like surprisingly well.
Yeah, that's so funny because that's definitely the TO path, right? Like there's a built-in, there's like a certain personality trait that pretty much all TOs have, the ones who, especially the ones who do it for a long
Yeah.
time. Like you just have this desire to bring people together and this ability to like help, like to coordinate people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree.
Um, so you host your first tournament, and then from there, like, you were just kind of like, was you just kind of, well, you were with EGTV, right?
Yeah, kind of. That's an interesting origin story in itself, where EGTV technically existed uh, prior to me, in that EGTV formed with Eirik, or Eric, as some people in the Smash community
Mm-hmm.
would know him as. But I've known Eric and Samantha, who used to go by the tag Raimi.
Mm-hmm.
She and him were both a part of the Mario Kart community, as was I, and that's what I know them from. So I've known them both since probably like 2011,
Mm-hmm.
but just in an online sense. And I wasn't like particularly close with Eric. I was probably closer with Samantha. But over time, like, grew to know them within that community both. Um, but then I kind of went my separate ways with that community for the most part when I got into Smash. But meanwhile, Eric was making an effort to kind of bring professional broadcasting to Mario Kart, because that scene really didn't have it at all. And he had gotten, Eric is kind of a go-getter guy himself. Like, he's
Mm-hmm.
always been one of those people who initiates and gathers people together too. And like, I mean, he's a TO in his own right, finding like a lot of success within, coming to prominence within the Splatoon community, really. And after Mario Kart, after he gave the Mario Kart World Cup a go in 2015, and kind of established EGTV's branding with Samantha, who you also work with now. Like,
Yes.
Samantha's done a lot of Smash branding for a lot of different people.
Yeah, she's been
Um,
huge for SAK's branding, like just immense.
yeah,
It was so funny because when I met her, she had just pinged me a couple of times. This was back around, I think, around Runback 2017, 2016, I
yeah, it
think.
would have been a
And
while ago.
yeah, and she no, because she did the overlays for Runback, so it was before that. But I remember her messaging me and just being like, "Hey, I do graphics, I do them for EGTV. I'd love to do yours." And then I just like, I have this really bad habit, especially if I'm super like busy just with TOing in general, is I just don't respond to people sometimes, which is like
Yes,
super
yeah,
bad. But it's so funny because like she kept messaging me, and then finally she put together an entire portfolio, and she was like, here's some branding ideas I have and some concepts. And it was like super professionally done with like detailed reasons as to like why each branding decision was made. And I was like, okay, you're actually, okay, you're really good. And
yeah.
I did not think about us needing this, but we do totally need this. So yeah.
Yeah, she's crazy cool in that I think a lot of her work, and like her work ethic and her thoughtfulness in her designs and her style, all has such deep ties to the work she did. She was making like graphic banners as like a kid in the Mario Kart community as prizes for like events and stuff. And
Wow.
that's like what her work is rooted in. And that's like what I knew her from. And like we like used to be in like one of the same like small teams together. And so it's really cool to see her, having flourished over time and like become the designer she is today with like those roots in mind. And she did all of EGTV's branding like way back then. And so this is going on like outside of the scope of what I do. And then what basically happened, because they got into Splatoon, like Eirik decided to take Endgame TV away from Mario Kart and develop like a professional brand for the Splatoon community, which is
Mhm.
what I would say Endgame TV became known in first, like predominantly. And then I think in late 2015, August 2015, me and Eric reconnected. I can't remember why, but we ended up like talking to each other, and I basically said like, "Hey man, I've been hosting Smash tournaments for a couple years now. I'm moving down to Seattle and I'm about to start like hosting really big stuff. Do you want to just brand these Smash tournaments under what you have made? Because I think like what you've done is awesome." And that was the conversation, and then that's what pulled Samantha into Smash 2, and then we basically became the early parts of that team, and that's like transformed into what it is today.
They just did something with Mario Kart during the pandemic, right? Didn't they bring back the World Cup or something similar to it?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, me and Eric had gotten back into the Mario Kart community in 2019, the summer of 2019, because the game had its first like real competitive LAN. And me and Eric went to it after not playing for quite a few years because we just wanted to reconnect with old friends that like we grew up with.
Yeah, which
And
version is this,
it
by the
kind of
way? Is this Wii or is this Switch?
yeah, Mario Kart Wii.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So for those who want to take a little like side excursion after this, we had a Washington Post article written about the community and the event by Alex Lee, who does a lot of fantastic writing for the Smash community as well, in like ESPN and
Hmm.
other yeah, established like journalism, outlets for journalism. But he wrote that article, and basically it was about like how EGTV kind of like went back to its roots with that event, and
Yeah.
like me and Eric decided to organize like a new Mario Kart World Cup in this year off, so to speak, because like all of our live event work went out the door, and it came together really, really nicely. So that was kind of a nice side project because I've worked just on Smash stuff mostly for so long that it was
Hmm.
just really nice to delve back into a game that I also really care about and just do something like really fresh and new.
Yeah, that's been the funny thing about the pandemic too. Is like, especially for a lot of TOs, like I definitely was reaching burnout after 5 years of TOing. Um, and I was just getting to this place where I was like, I just needed a break. And so like as much as like I wish the pandemic hadn't happened at all, because there's been a lot of, not just like for us, like it's been a really difficult time, but obviously like worldwide. But that one of the upsides I've taken from it, when I always try to look on the bright side in general, has been that I've gotten a really nice break
Oh, absolutely.
from the routine, because especially at the level, like we were operating at like super high RPM all through 2019, because it's like Ultimate came out, it blew up, we were like perfectly positioned, where we had the Ooh.
I think it may have swapped inputs.
um okay, I'm coming through on OBS again. You hear me?
You're all good now.
Okay, cool. For that, I bumped it, now it's broke. Okay, we're good, we're living. Anyways, so yeah, 20, like Ultimate comes out, we're perfectly positioned, we got all the setups, we've got the lounge, we were having 100-person weeklies. Ascension starts up and just takes off, and so like we were running at just super high RPM. I mean, when the pandemic hit, we were running
Yeah.
6 weeklies a week. We were running weeklies from Sunday to Friday, all across like the Phoenix area. And I have a kid, and so like that first year as a father was really hard, and I just was dropping more and more back from running the events, and was trying to like move into more of like just being able to manage things and focus on new concepts and ideas. And this kind of like just gave us the shove to be like, all right, well, there's no more tournaments, so start figuring stuff out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you were doing crazy, crazy numbers like last year. I remember looking at like the number of raw events you were doing, coupled with like the amount of people that were showing up for both. Like I can't imagine how much stress that would have been. So I do agree that for a lot of people, this year has been a unique time for a lot of people to actually take time off and like readjust.
Yeah, I always said, I did like an Instagram live months ago, and like one of the things I kind of said was like, this is a time for people to, you can take this time and use it to like better yourself, to pursue something you've always wanted to pursue, or you can just kind of sit around and wait for things to go back to normal. But like what I think everyone has to realize is that how the world was prior to March of this year, it is not going to be that way for a long time again, if ever. And so I think people who are going to be the most successful are going to be the people who adapt and who are willing to transition and roll with it, rather than clinging to how things used to be.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's actually something that we've been telling ourselves at work a lot at Beyond the Summit, and our whole business model has uh, changed pretty dramatically this year to a very like successful degree, I would say. But it was a stressful time at work for a while, and I'm sure it was for anybody in this industry where you kind of realize you have to pivot to like be successful in this like new environment and like keep things going.
Yeah. So I mean, well, we'll get to BTS and everything with the pandemic a little later because I wanted to finish your backstory.
Sure.
One thing I want to circle back to the documentary. It's so interesting that you bring up the doc because the doc always comes up when people talk about Smash, especially Melee. I don't know what it is about the documentary, but there is something that it just hooks you in and you just get locked in. And it's like once you watch that whole documentary, and even if you only go to a few tournaments, I feel like Melee is just a part of you forever. I don't know what it is about that documentary, but it's so unique in that it has lit the fire in so many people. And even today, I think if a lot of the new people coming into Melee, if they were to watch it, it would have the same effect.
Yeah, I think it wove such a beautiful story and used the right components to like really drive the emotional point home.
Hmm.
I go back and I still watch episode 9 because it like reminds me that it's the last episode. It reminds me why I like did it all.
Yeah.
Because I think it really brings the points that are most important to the forefront, and that this is about like coming together and spending time with each other and playing this really cool and unique game that is, in my opinion, unlike anything else.
Hmm.
And you enjoy it and you enjoy each other's company and you make a lot of like fond memories. And I think that was the appeal when I watched it, was because I think I've always been like a pretty like social and extroverted person, and the idea of being able to compete and get into a game and have that in-person experience was just so like appealing. The
Hmm.
community aspect, the game was incredibly cool in the way it's presented, of course, but I think the community aspect itself is like what really, really sucks you in, like watching that,
Well,
there's so many like quotable things, like wife in particular has an incredible way of speaking about the game and its community in that. And I think also a few quotes that I really, really love come from Chaotic in it. And
mhm.
Chaotic is like an old school Australian player and organizer. He's kind of phased out of the scene now. He shows up at BAM over there like every year. Um, but I think he has some wonderful quotes in that like really, really hit home with me, and I still think about.
Yeah. The community aspect is interesting too that you mentioned that because I think as TOs, that's one thing that we really key in on. And that seems to be something that's shared across pretty much all TOs is the community and how important the community is. And I was listening to Dr. K's session with the panel from the Smash community today. And, they were talking about how hard it was to see everything that happened in July. And um, Hugo and TK in particular were talking about how it just felt like it was so painful. It was so painful to watch. And I remember that feeling exactly because like I actually deleted Twitter, and I have kept it off my phone. Good decision. I actually have had no regrets. But I had to actually remove Twitter from my phone at one point because I could not handle just the avalanche of stories that were coming out, and I still read about them and I still kept up with them, but it was like, I mean, you remember, it was like it seemed like every hour of every day there was something
Dude,
coming out.
it was crazy hearing them talk about it and like listen, and then talking to like just friends and like the people I live with who are all connected to Smash, and like the people at work.
Hmm.
There was that one night, man. There was that one night where we were all awake
Yep.
until like I was up until like 4 a.m. my
Yes.
time, and everybody was still online because it kept every fucking 20 minutes, man.
Mm.
Something new would just drop, and each one was just more heartbreaking, and it just like weighed like so heavily on everyone, I think. And it's actually like really interesting thinking about that shared experience and that shared pain on like kind of the side of everybody. Like it all hit so home and hit so personally with everybody that we would all literally stay awake an entire night. Like that's pretty crazy that that could even happen to begin with. I think that speaks to like the closeness and camaraderie of it all in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, however unfortunate the stories, you know, I think we're certainly better off for it, you know, it all coming to light.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the as TOs, you very quickly take responsibility for your community and the community at large. And this is something like my wife does not understand this. My wife, like, she got so mad at me when I was like talking to her about it, because I was like, this stuff, it just keeps happening and more. So she's like, I can't listen to any more of this. Like, I just can't. This was after like day one. She was like, I can't listen anymore. I was like, well, it's not getting any better.
Yeah, because it went on. It was like, dude, it was like more than a week. It was a couple weeks.
And it's interesting because in particular for TOs, for the people who have the TO gene, I really feel like we take responsibility for our community just by default. And my wife has never understood this. Like, she's always like, you know, oh, you talk about the Smash community and the Smash community, and you know, they like, why do you do so much? Like, you give everything to this community, and like you act like you're their caretaker and their mentor or whatever. And I was like, well, I don't think of myself that way, but I feel this deep obligation. And especially for me, the way that SAK has worked out, where TOing became my full-time job, and so I really felt like I owed it to the community, and still do, because they got like
Totally agree. I think there, I think there's this like unique combination of you as a TO are often just in a position that has forced you to become, you know, in a positive way, I would say, so intertwined with every level of like member within the community. Like, you know, people who become commentators, you know, other TOs, you know, good players, you know, not even good players, players just that show up all the time and become pillars of like the local scene, the national scene. So when these stories like start to break, it's like, one, you were often like new or like were friends with these people, you were around them a lot, and then also you're kind of in charge of fostering this like positive and safe space for all attendees. So you think about like what you could have done, you know, in order to stop some of these things. And I think it's just this weight and this obligation of like whatever position or mantle you've taken up as a TO, that it's difficult not to feel that way. And I think it's important that you know, for a lot of TOs that I've talked to, is like talking about like for the people who have taken like too much ownership of it in a way, especially the people I've spoken to that I know are fantastic people who really consider these issues and have really done everything in their power to keep their events safe, from like shouldering too much of that blame, because at some point there's, you know, there's only so much you can do, right? There's only so much you can do until like it becomes uh the sole responsibility of like the other party's actions. Uh, Not to like stop the topic from steamrolling, by the way, but your mic input like changed, so I don't know if that matters.
everything's breaking again. I think it's fine now.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Did it give you a pop-up when it changed?
So yeah, just pardon?
Does it give you a pop-up when my input changed?
It doesn't change. It doesn't give me a pop-up. Your voice just froze for a second, but not in a way where it signals that it's like the connection was bad. It just like froze a sec, and then it sounded different like a moment later.
Okay.
Like pivoted.
Yeah, I need a new cable, I think. Okay, so anyways, we're talking about people shouldering too much responsibility.
Yeah, and like talking like just the whole situation that arose on like the podcast that Dr. K and Healthy Gamer had done.
Yeah. I think gotta get back on my train of thought here, but I think that that there is this, like you said, there's this shared sense of responsibility, I think, amongst all TOs. And I was very thankful that Arizona, we just didn't get it that bad, because we have,
Yeah.
I felt, very proactively fostered a community where anyone can come to me about anything, something my wife also hates. But when I get a text from someone at 11 o'clock at night and they're like, hey man, I really got to talk to you about something. And sometimes it's just like personal drama of just like, you know, just people being like, oh, I'm struggling with this thing and I don't know what to do about it. But then also someone coming to me with like something really serious, like saying like, I was a minor, I was in, this person started a relationship with me and I just like, and so you have to take action on those things. We got really lucky that, we've fostered that sense of community where people feel comfortable to talk to us. But there's still stuff that like I find out. One of my TOs talked to me once, talked to me recently, and she's like, this person did this person, like she gave me like a laundry list of people, of like guys who had harassed her at tournaments, like touched her inappropriately, said inappropriate things to her. And I was like, that's still stuff even I didn't know about. And so there's always still like more work to do in that regard. But I felt thankful that the really major stuff, the stuff that came out on Twitter that was like really major, we had already known about and dealt with. And I was really thankful for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a relief in one way, and kind of a confirmation of the positive things you guys have done in the past. I think like for the most part, UGTV was in a similar spot where, the stuff we knew about had already been handled and we were ahead of it. I think there was like one case in particular of a person who had frequented our tournaments for quite a few years, someone who I'd known a long time that I didn't know about at all, who was one of the first accusations, and he was a Smash player from BC. And that was really, really unfortunate to read, because it's, at that point, he was like probably one of the players I met like earlier in my time in the scene. So it's like always like pretty shocking to read something like that about someone who you've known for so long. But other than that case, like I felt, like between like what we had done in the past and the TOs we have in the region now, like the main one that comes to mind is Scott Thomas Jr., who runs Port Priority up in Washington. I think he and his team do a really good job of navigating these things and staying ahead of them. So a lot of other people in the Pacific Northwest that look to handle these issues. And then I'm not much of a, I'm located in SoCal, but I wouldn't call myself much of a like SoCal TO. But I think the like groups of people down here, like Dawson and like Jerry from Top Shelf, they all do a pretty good job of these things as well, and try to stay ahead of them. People who like know or learn about these things and are like pillars of their community that people trust coming to, and they do a good job of like removing the people who are problematic from the community, like whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. It is weird looking back on it though, because sometimes I think about all the stories and I'm like, how did we miss all this?
Yeah, I feel that way sometimes. I think the awkward ones are the things that were like rumored and no one really did anything about. And it's tough because I think for some TOs that may have wanted to look more into these things, or some community members that wanted to look more into these things, didn't have a lot to go on. Or in some cases, like, unless the victim like wants to speak out in like an issue of sexual abuse and they aren't willing to come forward with any details, then it's often really hard to like move the problem forward, which is tough because like if the thing isn't like publicly known by people, and or if the victim doesn't want people to speak about it, it's in this awkward situation where people can actually like get away with these things. And it's fucked because the victim is already under the pressure of like having dealt with this situation in the first place, and maybe just doesn't trust the kind of like system we have built around us to handle it, which is fair in a lot of ways. And I think it creates this like really hard situation. I think the first one that comes to mind is the whole thing with Senpai, where I think a lot of people saw the tweets that originally accused this of happening like a year ago, and we all just kind of like skated over it because like no one no one close enough to the situation was actually able to come out and like say anything or confirm anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like an accusation lofted by a person that most people weren't familiar with on Twitter. And especially like I not to like absolve ourselves of responsibility, but I do think that when like we as TOs who have worked our entire careers on the opposite side of the country, who don't know these people very well, who don't know like the victim, or have no relationship with that victim, for them to like come forward to us, at that point, I think the responsibility is upon the local TOs and the code of conduct and people who exist within those scenes to like help solve those problems. Because
Yeah.
I personally do not feel like I, as a person who is from my region, am equipped to deal with that issue, unless like out of the blue Puppy like was the person chose to come to me for whatever reason, then I would approach that issue. But he doesn't even know me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he has no reason to speak to me about it. And it puts us in a tough spot where it's like, how come no one did anything about this that like obviously a lot of people knew about, but nobody close enough to the issue is actually willing to take the action.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's just one of those things when we think about like, the way tournaments. I think someone said something once where they were just like, you know, we're taking a bunch of young adults and kids, like, any people anywhere from like 14 to 25. We're putting them all in most of them are in an foreign state, right? Like, or they're out of state, they're traveling somewhere, they're staying in a hotel with no supervision, and they're all playing video games. And someone was like, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, it's like I
I think
wish.
that's too harsh, personally.
I think that is a harsh perspective, and I see why. I see people who do have that perspective, and to me it's the same thing as the people who are like, there can be no friendships between adults and children within this community. And I look back on it as like obviously we have to be vigilant, and people need to look out for children, especially within the space. But a gaming community is meant to be inclusive, and I think for as a younger person, who as a kid who always looked for the respect and like admiration of people older than me,
Mm-hmm.
and the validation from those people, I think it's important for people to have a have a you can have a positive relationship with a child without being a pedophile, like
Yes.
to just like be blunt.
Yes, you can.
Like I think to like a really really good Falco player in Vancouver, his name is Elliot. He's probably like 15 or 16 now. He started playing when he was 10. He started going to tournaments when he was 10. I
Mm-hmm.
met him and his mom at a tournament. I was just nice. I was pretty young myself. Like I think I was probably like 17 when I met him, but I like simply like met his mom, and I was just like nice to him. I basically like treated him like I would treat like any other young kid who like just wanted, because I think what I remember when I interact with kids is like how much respect from older kids meant to me. So I try to just be nice and like make
Yes.
sure their experience is positive. And I met his mom, and then from then on, at the tournaments that his mom knew I was at, she would ask me like if she could like basically like leave for the day, and I would just like keep an eye on him. And that's what I did. And I think I did a positive thing for the community in that sense. And it's the same thing. I think I just look through it in the eyes of like, I have little brothers who are like a lot younger than me, and I
Mm-hmm.
just like treat kids in like, obviously not in the fucking same way, like the same exact way, but in the sense that I treat these kids like with respect and make sure that they're safe, and that they have a welcoming environment to come participate and be happy when they fucking play games.
Yes.
And I think that's really really important, because young people are the building blocks of any community. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think about like what the next generation of Melee looks like. It's going to be the kids that are picking up Slippi right now, and the kids who are willing to go to tournaments, because the rest of us who get older, like me and you, are lucky enough to find a place in our lives where this all fits in. But I think for most people, they have to step away from it. And whether they want to, like, the community to be alive or not, their presence does not help fuel the active scene anymore. And that younger generation will always be the new generation that steps up and keeps that thing alive, just like any sport or game. that's how chess will be alive. That's how soccer will be alive. That's
Mm-hmm.
how football will be alive. That's how all these games stay relevant, is because kids get into them and they learn to play the game and they become the next generation of that title. And our community is the same way. And like, there's no people like talked about like banning kids who are under 18 from events. Is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can't just close them off from the scene. I think we just need to do an active job of making, for one, you as an organizer, I think you need to keep an eye out for kids specifically. I think children need to be kept safe like more than anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, in my eyes, that would be the utmost priority. And also it falls on the parents as well. You're, as a parent, you are responsible for your child.
Yeah.
And I think that's also important. So I think those like drastic takes, and it sounds like you agree, like, I just think those are unreasonable. I think they are understandable as a gut reaction to these horrible stories that had come out. But I do think it's important to be sensible still,
Yeah.
and realize like what is actually practical, and like is it really unnecessary to cut off every child from attending an event ever to keep them all safe? That it's probably a little drastic, and there are probably other equally effective things we could do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think that the I've said before that one of the most important things to me, and the thing that I miss the most just right now, is seeing people come together, especially younger kids, like high school kids, where they come to tournaments and they find something that they've never had in their life before, which is a group of peers who accept them and respect them and make them feel welcome. And there are so many stories of people whose kids who start coming to tournaments, and they meet their best friends for life, and they're going to grow up, and they're going to grow up with them and know them for the rest of their lives, and form bonds that are lasting and important. And so I agree. Like, I don't think you can't just say like, well, if you're under 18, you can't come to a tournament anymore. I don't think that one, I don't think that solves the problem, because I guess it does protect in a really like rigid way the most vulnerable members of the community, the young kids. But it also doesn't stop the problem, because the problem is not just that it's minors, it's that it's a rampant culture of or was a rampant culture of of abuse of power and sexual abuse, and in particular of women, no matter what age they were, being targeted by men who did not understand how to respect and treat women in general.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's also important to note, right? Is the reality is that the majority of stories were not issues of people interacting with people who were underage. The majority of the stories were people interacting just with women, period, in inappropriate ways.
Yeah.
I
Or
think
men.
or men. And I think those are not to discount, because I think like the stories that affect children are often the ones that stand out the most in people's minds,
Yeah.
because I think for most people that is particularly egregious, but the broader issue extends way beyond that. And it's and I gotta be honest, I think the issue is like a pervasive and issue in culture in general.
Yes.
Like, this is you do not, I think, talking to any woman outside of the Smash community, they do not escape this problem by exiting Smash, unfortunately. But we do have this like kind of like exaggerated example of it within our space, probably because we are like so male dominated in comparison to like just a normal social group.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously these are these are certainly issues our community has to deal with, regardless of the problem existing outside of the space.
Yeah. And I think, in the future, and hopefully in 2021, when we're able to go to tournaments again, I think that the biggest responsibility that we have as organizers and organizers nationwide have, is to come out and say, like, this is a welcoming, inclusive community, and everyone has the right to feel safe. And if you ever feel unsafe for any reason, please approach me, whether that's, if they have an anonymous tip line or an anonymous reporting system or whatever. But I think that it's really important, because that was one of the big things that, we had a problem in like mid 2018 in the Smash 4 community of, people being like really offensive. And it was just the kind of last vestiges of the early Melee and the Brawl era, right? It was the like, it was like, I mean, honestly, the way a lot of people said it was like it was the rape and smash era, right? Where it was like that era where you could be like, you could say that, like you could be like, oh, he like raped him or whatever, and like, which was
I
like,
mean, yeah, speaking of the doc, right? Like even in terms of the doc setting an example of what the culture is, that word's like really present in there. And
yes,
admittedly, the doc literally has a section devoted to why that language is not acceptable, but it is also not excluded from the way that people speak about the game. So I think like that from the get-go sets like a standard for like what language is in the community. So
yeah, and we had a real problem with that language being with not just like you know, language about like rape, but also just like racism. Like there was like
yeah,
just kind of core group of people that had come from that era and had not let it go, and then
yeah,
finally like it came to my attention enough that I realized like, okay, we have to do something about this. And we developed, this was like right when the national code of conduct hit. We developed
yeah,
an SAK code of conduct, and I made a post and I said like, this is not acceptable, this shouldn't be happening anymore, and if you, there's going to be these consequences. And within like a month it stopped, and the community was that much safer for it. So you know, the people who are leading have the responsibility to come out and say like, you know, like what is acceptable in their community and what is not
yeah.
acceptable, and encourage everyone, you know. And I think it can be hard sometimes because people, like a lot of those guys, I don't think it's as hard anymore, but at that time a lot of those guys were like the old school players, and they're cool, and like, you know, they're the
Yeah.
legends of Smash, and but you have to just be able to say like, no, this is not acceptable, it's 2020, like we don't condone that kind of language anymore, and that this
Yeah.
is not, like it or not, Smash is so large now that there has to be a code of conduct panel. There has to be rules and guidelines, and everyone needs to be welcome, because we're not playing in our basements anymore. We're playing in gigantic, you know, like 50,000 square foot ballrooms. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it's different. It's definitely different. And I think for what you said about the old guard that often like kind of was the cool people who got to set the standard for like what the scene was like. I think at this point, now that it's been, in November, it will have been 7 years since the doc dropped.
mhm.
7 or in October, sorry, it'll be 7 years. And like for me, 7 years of having played in November, and the newer the dot kid generation is already older than some of the old school generation was when we started, right?
Yep.
And I think it's this new, not even new, but like that wave of the community that is now the majority and gets to set the standard for what is acceptable, rather than people riding like the glory of 2012 and prior, which
Yes.
in a lot of ways is a like a positive thing, right? It's like that new wave of the community has finally come into its own and gets to say like, you know what, this is like isn't okay anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, so circling back, so you're in Washington, you go to college, and then you get involved with EGTV. At what point do you get involved with SmashGG?
Sure. So I think the timeline would be I finished my community college degree and graduated from high school in June 2015, and then that later that September I moved down to Seattle to go to the University of Washington. And that first year of school, that's when I reached out to Eric when Endgame TV got into Smash, when we hosted our first Endgame TV Smash event, which was Emerald City 1
Mm-hmm.
in January 2016, which immediately became like a huge series. I think it was like a coincidence of like solving problems that tournaments had in the local area, combined with each 2016 was just when the game 2016 to 2017 was like when the game was at its peak in terms of numbers,
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
So that was just like when attendance was nuts no matter what you did. And that immediately established the series, which is really nice. And then I think I started applying to internships because I was in this weird situation where, typically, I guess at my age, you would be in your first year of college and not really worrying too much about what you did the following summer.
Yeah.
But I was effectively already in my junior year because of my degree, my 2-year degree I'd already gotten. So I started applying for internships, And in a weird like path of events, I stayed in the same hotel room as Sean, the founder of SmashGG, at PAX Prime 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed in the same hotel room, got to know him that weekend, just became friends, and I was helping TO that weekend. And that's also how I met a ton of people that I'm friends with in the community now, because so many big players. That was probably Seattle's biggest event up until that point, was like the PAX Prime event. And I talked to Sean a few times here and there. Like, I was a really early adopter of SmashGG for tournament organizing. Like, I used it in like August 2015, which is like a few months after like it was open to the public, I think. And that was like when most events were still using Challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having a call with him, and he was explaining to me that they were going to add new teams features that we could use for our Splatoon events. And then he also mentioned at the end of the call that they were going to open internships. And this is in like April 2016. I'm still desperately trying to lock an internship down in like less than, like a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that sounds dope. Like, I'll apply as soon as possible.
What was your major?
And with I majored in finance.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was looking at like some fucking shitty insurance gig, like, because I was just kind of like trying to take whatever I could at that point.
Yeah.
Because I was just applying to stuff so late. And they put out the application for their internship so late that I ended up getting in like early. And I had this recommendation from the person who's the CEO of the company at the time. And that was kind of my in, I guess. Like, I interviewed, and I got the internship like in like late May, and I literally moved to Berkeley like 3 weeks later. Like, I found my apartment in like 2 weeks, and moved to Berkeley for the summer and worked out of the office in San Francisco for that summer.
And this was all at the age. This was all at the age of 18.
Yeah, I just turned 19 when I got the internship.
Wow, that's so young to be getting involved with like a major company in San Francisco, moving, like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's really funny in retrospect. Like, I didn't think anything of it. Like, that stuff. Like, moving. We moved around a lot. Like, when I was super young, and it's never like moving has never like been a problem in my eyes. It's just something you like do. So as soon as I got the job, I was like, well, I guess I need an apartment. And I like didn't even really like panic. I just kind of like found something cheap. Really weird portion of my life. I actually ended up rooming in a 1-bedroom with 2 girls in Berkeley for that summer who I'd never met before. And we had a bunk bed and another twin bed in the room. We all slept in the same room, and I paid $650 a month for that in Berkeley.
Holy shit.
And still had to commute into San Francisco because like it was I was getting paid like a decent amount for sure, but it just like San Francisco is so blisteringly expensive that I couldn't afford anything. So it's just like in retrospect, all a very weird summer. And then that was how I got in. Like, I was an intern for that summer, and when my internship was concluding, I basically asked like, hey, I realized that I have to go back to school, but I'm pretty sure I can do this job part-time for you guys, like from what I was doing. Like, I'm confident I can do this part-time and remote. Would you let me do that? And they said yes. And that was also this soft confirmation of me being hired full-time as soon as I was done with college. So it was like, this is a perfect thing. Like, I've basically locked down my job. I'll have a part-time job while I'm in school for the rest of the year. And yeah, that was kind of the start of the SmashGG experience, if you will.
Nice. So we're going to dive into this because I think you're going to be able to offer some really, really interesting insights on SmashGG, because the whole arc of SmashGG and SmashGG in general, like the whole thing is very fascinating. You know, you have the rise of the revitalization of Melee, right? You're going into 2015. Heading towards 2016, 2017, where numbers were just totally crazy, and there was a need, right, for a tournament system that was more advanced than Challenge, because Challenge was just so basic. Just it was good enough for you to be able to run a basic tournament with, but trying to do something on the scale of a Genesis or an Evo was nigh impossible. And you had like Evo trying to, they had built their own website where they were running, but it was like, it took like 3 days for the brackets to update and everything. It was crazy. So here comes SmashGG with with solutions to all these problems. And admittedly, solutions for what, while it was exploding, was a very niche market. And
Yeah.
with Smash, like, right, Smash is a community, a gaming community in the larger subset of the larger umbrella of esports. So Smash is still very niche, right? Like, it's not like
Yeah.
like it's one of the most popular games out there, I think, in terms of multiplayer games, as well as esports that people like can get into on a ground level. But it's still pretty niche. So here comes this company with solutions for all these solutions, and then they expand out to all these other games. But it's been very interesting to watch the arc, and I there's a lot of questions, I think, about what happened towards like in like 2019, beginning in 2019, and because from what I saw of the company working closely with the SmashGG to do compendiums and stuff, is, you know, it took off and it was like amazing, like, you know, being able to do round robins into a bracket with no need to make a new bracket, like that alone was incredible. But then add in the fact that you can do amateur brackets too, and it's all automated. I mean, like, you know, like, that's like incredible. But
Yeah.
it seemed like in 2019, you know, like, you heard about SmashGG getting all the you know, they got like, I think it was like $6 million in Series D funding. If I remember correct,
11 million,
11 million.
I think. Yeah, so it was like I can't remember which came when. I think the one before I came on, or around when I came on, was there was a 3 million seed round and then an 11 million A series, if I recall.
Yeah. So I mean, like,
Yeah.
that's like incredible that, you know, like, you have this esports platform and it's growing, it's getting funding. And then in like 2019, there just seems to have been this kind of stall out where, like, there weren't as many new features kind of stopped being added, and then things that were problematic were not fixed. And then talking to, like, you know, just interacting with people that I knew that worked there, they seemed very overworked, very stressed. And that's not to say that like SmashGG itself is a bad website. It's still great. It's still what I prefer to organize my tournaments on. But I'm just curious, like, I've always been curious, like, what, you having been there firsthand, what happened?
It is hard. It is hard to describe it, like, the complete picture. Um I think the main things is that over time uh the direction, I think there was a general disagreement within the company about the direction that the platform needed to move in. So a lot of people in the Smash community don't realize that Smash GG is much more than just Smash. There is Rocket League on the platform. There's Hearthstone. There's all the, you know how you can like pick your characters for online tournaments within the Smash GG UI? You can do stuff like that with other games. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many features and things that were developed that people on the Smash side, or use the site for Smash purposes only, would never know about. So to them, these like glaring issues that were never fixed, and like, what are they working on? Well, they're working on a lot of different stuff that apply to other games that aren't Smash, because part of the company's vision was succeeding in spaces far beyond the reaches of just these, you know, couple Smash titles. And I think that's, for starters, very important to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
However, you could tell that over time, we definitely had a very like hardcore market in terms of the Smash community and the FGC community. Like, that was like our core user base, and the most valuable current thing we held was probably those communities. And there was kind of these arguments and these shifts within the company about whether or not resources needed to be used in order to expand away from that and to succeed as a site in a different sense that like is broader in esports, or basically to keep moving forward, or can we use dev resources on saving or fixing these aspects that these core communities on our platform have complained about for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an ongoing conversation that kind of reigned over every topic that ever came up for years. And I think basically the debt of problems kind of like caught up with the company in a way. I think that's like, at least that's like where I see like a lot of the problems coming from. There's a lot of other things to balance in this picture. Like, how does the company become profitable? Catering to Smash and FGC may not necessarily have been a path to becoming profitable. I'm more talking about a problem of like what would have made for like a better and like more respected product. But I can't. I actually am pretty confident that what I just suggested would not have like made the company a ton of money. Um, and that is like that question that you also have to weigh is like, this is a company that has been given an investment that is racing towards like becoming a profitable company somehow, and it just wasn't kind of working out. And I think there was never a clear vision and roadmap that was held to for a long enough period of time to become successful. Internally, things were always pivoting and being backtracked, and I think there was a lot of like disagreements between people at the company about how things should be handled. Personally, I think a big issue was that nobody in leadership was from esports, like had an esports background. The company had a very large like tech background and very successful people in tech, I might add. We had a lot of smart people at SmashGG who came from very successful tech companies. And I have a lot of respect for pretty much everybody that's ever worked at that company. But I think if you're going to succeed in the world of esports, the fact that we had nobody with like an actual super competent background in the esports industry like blows my mind in retrospect. And I walked into this company as my first job, so there's a lot of things I just didn't know, and I had to learn like along the way. And now with my hindsight, I can kind of look at these problems with like more clarity. So those are all things to keep in mind as to like why there were problems. I think ultimately, if you boiled like down to some core issues, like the company never really found its footing in how to make money. And ultimately that's pretty important in a company living. And unfortunately, as everything like moved on, I think there were a lot of like kind of stuck gears and frustrations from a lot of employees. I think a lot of people were overworked. It was like one of the most consistent complaints of people having worked there. That being my first job has totally distorted my idea of like what is normal and like I would dare say acceptable in a work environment. Like like my new job, I remark to my boss every day. I'm actually pretty blown away by like how much I'm just never stressed at work anymore. And I have a lot to do right now, for instance. Like right now I'm pretty busy. And I'm not stressed at all. Like it just seems so manageable in comparison to what I used to do. Or at least in comparison to the hours that I used to do, and weirdly more productive in the same way, in the sense that I think that was also a problem at SmashGG, where a lot of us would put in incredible hours but have very little to like show for it because of the lack of direction I think there was. That being said, I think the software has an incredible place within the community still, and still brings a lot of value that if it were to disappear today, nothing would fill the void that it would leave. Like there's nothing that exists currently that fills everything that this community gets from SmashGG, and that's actually a huge problem. Is like I, as someone who doesn't work there anymore, I don't have this great insight into what the future looks like for that company, and I worry about what a future without SmashGG looks like. Because currently the alternatives on the table, things like Battlefy, things like Challenge, things like Matcherino, they all have like little bits and pieces of SmashGG, but none of them are the holistic picture that especially big tournaments need. Like if you're a local, people are already using Challenge a lot of the time anyway, because it's more about like speed and efficiency, right? But if you're going to run Genesis, where are you going to turn to right now? Your options are absolutely shit. And I think that's the thing, is like for all the problems that the company has had over the years and like whether or not they ended up making money, it has become a very important pillar in this community's, like in the way that the community operates, specifically Smash, and not just Smash. The FGC needs that platform as well. So that's something to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's been something that has kind of stuck with me, as like you said, like the core market really became Smash and the FGC because the tools that are available solve so many problems for TOs on that, especially when you're on a massive scale, like a Genesis, like like Full Bloom, like the Big House, like all like any of those super major tournaments. I don't know if they could have grown to the level they did without SmashGG, without the solutions that website provides. But yeah, it is kind of like going forward. Well, just in general, to speak to the esports thing, it is interesting that you mentioned there was no one with a really strong background in esports for an esports platform in leadership. Because the biggest thing with esports, as you know, is it's constantly shifting. So you have these like core, these cores of like, here's the Smash community, here's the FGC, League of Legends, pretty static. And like Dota, Fortnite, but Dota, League of Legends, and Fortnite don't really have a use for SmashGG. Like they don't.
No, it's just not the same. We tried to get ready for that was a big thing in retrospect that kind of blew a lot of time, I think, is we really tried to use a lot of resources to prepare for Battle Royale games and their explosion, which they of course did. But we ran into the issue of those games not having custom matchmaking for a long time after their release. So our platform ended up not being very efficient. Yeah, in like Warzone's case, it still doesn't exist, right? And then even when it came to custom matchmaking tournaments, like it's hard to design a UI that is more convenient to use than like Google Sheets for that type of formatted tournament. Yeah. Like, because in a brackets case, right, for Smash, it's like creating that in Google Sheets would be a nightmare because most of the function of what's going on you want to be automated. But in a game like Fortnite, a lot of the function isn't you're dumping like 100 players in a pool and 100 players in a pool and then tracking scores.
Yeah.
And that's not something that SmashGG really can provide a great breakthrough for. So I think like that's like an issue is like those games they don't really need a platform like ours in the same way. There are some games that did. I think like the biggest community that I worked with really early on, and that was probably a big part of SmashGG's history, is actually Rocket League. Rocket League had a huge presence on the site, and then later on Hearthstone as well. And then I also think games like Clash Royale and things, anything that has like a team versus team or a 1v1 component with large brackets and large tournaments has a use for that platform. Mm-hmm. But I think like when you're talking about games like Dota, where the tournaments are often like, if it's an amateur tournament, it's often going to be less than 16 teams and a pretty short tournament.
Yeah.
And if you're like a company like ESL, you don't really have a use for a tournament because you just throw up your brackets on the stream and on Liquipedia, and that is like significantly more convenient because whoever say like Arteezy, the Dota player, is not filling out his results as he plays, Yeah,
exactly.
Somebody is doing that for him because he makes $1 million a year, and he's not. Their communities are just so different in what they require, and like I think the platform is built to benefit particularly team versus team 1v1 grassroots communities like ourselves.
Yeah, and unfortunately there just isn't a lot of money in those communities either. And that's one of the things is, I think the number one question everyone asks with SmashGG was it always just would be like, man, this is amazing. What an incredible website. They've solved all these problems for us.
Yeah.
How are they going to make money?
And yes, that question came up all the time, dude. I think it's really funny too. The question I get a lot, which is surprising to me because I feel like it's actually a really easy question to answer, is like SmashGG like has these like houses at Evo, and like you guys like have gone on vacations and stuff, and it's like I don't think people realize in the grand scheme like stuff like the Evo house is actually like a relatively small expense, all things considered. Like it's not it is in no way a significant part of the spending that goes on in a company like yearly. And I always like thought that was weird. That's like, yeah, dude, they're going out of business. They're just blowing it on parties. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it has nothing to do with that, man. Like, it's like you're just like latching onto this like very visible thing that is like a small piece of the puzzle. And I think like there are way greater concerns in making a company profitable than having like a party for people here and there.
If you were to build a replacement for SmashGG, so let's say, let's say SmashGG goes away and like we're like, okay, we need a replacement, and the best minds in Smash get together. We all everyone who has coding background, we all get together. What do you put in that website, and how do you make it so that it at least breaks even for the expenses that come with operating that kind of place?
Honestly, dude, think you need to streamline and like rebuild the most critical parts of a bracket platform. So making sure it has like core bracket features, core registration features that, you know, every regional plus Smash TO uses. And then I think you just have to charge. I think you have to charge like every user, every TO, like some sort of monthly fee to have access to it. Because I think at this stage, anybody who's running large tournaments, like I would pay $50 a month to have access to something like that, especially if there's no alternative.
Yeah.
I would pay $50 a month, and I'm sure there's a decent amount of other organizers out there that would be willing to bite the fee, especially those who like run companies and stuff, to like basically pay some high fee for some highly specialized software. And I think that's perhaps the only way of going about it. I think if you look at the other similar platforms in that space that are making money, if you look at Battlefy, if you look at Challenger mode, they've chosen to go the white label route, which is basically going to custom like big events and being like, hey, Nintendo, hey, you know, Mortal Kombat developers, I think it's like WB Games or something. What's up? We know you guys want to do a tournament. We know you want like this custom experience for this like event and marketing thing you're doing. Pay us a buttload of money to make that very specific page for you, and we will do that. And that is more effective than catering to, unfortunately, more effective than catering to thousands of users who aren't willing to pay anything. Because I think like at scale, right, like the Smash community, I don't think they're necessarily large enough to fund a platform like that, like with ads, you know? Because I'm not going to SmashGG every day. I go there to register, I go there to play in tournaments, or I go there to run a tournament, right? It's not like Facebook, you know, where I'm logging in every second of every day, or I used to on Facebook. Facebook's phasing out a bit, but yeah, all the same, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think was there ever discussion, and do you think it could work to do like a just $1 convenience fee, where it's like every person who registers pays an extra $1 for registration because that's the convenience fee?
It was never, I feel like it was never seriously discussed, at least like not in spaces that I was in. That was always this thing that like eventually there would be some sort of fee, but it was always eventually, and it never really happened. And I think it was never talked about seriously. I don't think the implications of doing that were ever talked about seriously, at least, like I said, around me, because I wasn't like a founder or a lead of the company, right? And I'm sure people who have that level of investment in it talked about so many things with, you know, a lot of scrutiny and seriousness. But I remember every time that came up, like, I can't remember a time where that was seriously considered in the short term. Like a lot of other things were more important than that.
Yeah. Well, and I think with that, with SmashGG in particular, the money that you're burning through, you know, a $1 convenience fee on even Evo is not going to make a dent.
Yeah, it's just it's because like even with Evo, right? That's one of the biggest tournaments on the platform. That's $10,000.
Yeah.
Maybe on a good year, like $12,000.
Yeah.
Like that is, dude, that is a fraction of what it costs to pay an engineer in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
So you exited SmashGG. What kind of was the impetus behind that, and then how did you end up at BTS?
So there were kind of, I think for a lot of people, you could probably ask a lot of people, I think particularly in 2018 and then definitely the beginning of 2019, whereas when people were really wearing out. And some people started to leave the company. Some people started to get let go, like just here and there. And I think like for me personally, I think the company had shifted. One second. For me personally, the company had shifted so far away from what the vision when I originally joined. Not that the vision was necessarily super different, but more it had been years and I had been able to think about a lot of things. There'd been a lot of experiences at the company, and I just had no faith in the company vision anymore. And I think a lot of my I think in retrospect, I also feel like the work I was doing towards the end was not really being acknowledged. We had like metrics that we were trying to influence in particular. And the last major project I got off the ground at SmashGG was probably one of the biggest ones we ever had in terms of event creations, which was the Tekken World Tour. And I took that like project from, beginning to end, other than like the engineers who like developed a few specific features for it. And I really don't feel like that. In retrospect, I don't feel like the work I did on that event was like acknowledged at all, and that was something that bothered me. It was for some reason I felt like a lot of the stuff I did was overlooked, and it just didn't feel like the organization was like as functional anymore, and I had like no passion. I was so far removed from like what I wanted to be doing at that point, and I really wanted to find something that was more event planning centric, like more akin to TOing rather than I felt I was doing more sales work, and I didn't like that. I also didn't like that I felt like I was lying to people in sales. I think in sales you often have to like find ways to convince people to use a platform, in this case use a platform that isn't necessarily right for them, and I felt like I was in positions where I had to be doing that, and I didn't like that. Because I was talking to people and I'm like, I know this is not the best option for what you're doing right now. And in some cases it was. Some communities it absolutely, in some companies SmashGG absolutely was the best option for what they needed to do. But sometimes it wasn't. I didn't like that feeling. And I started looking for other jobs. And then I think in what was it? June 2019, I ended up leaving. Because at that point I'd interviewed a couple places and I was pretty confident I could land something else by like the end of the summer, and I would have this summer off. And for me also, it was kind of aligning at this weird time in my life where I'd gone to Seattle. This is my 4th year in Seattle at the time, and all of my friends that I made while I was at college, they were all like 2 years behind me in school. So this was their last year of school and like their last summer before a lot of them like moved away and stuff. Cause like effectively, like while I was working the previous 2 years, they were all finishing their last 2 years of college. So it's kind of living this like where I went to work and I worked at home, and I had this like very collegiate lifestyle that was surrounded by college friends in a college environment. And to me, it was like, well, this is kind of like my last summer too, in a way, where it's like, my friends are about to move on with their lives, and this is my last opportunity to kind of do the same with them.
Yeah.
And it was cool. And then during this time, I think earlier that year, I had started talking to BTS more in meetings at work, because I became the person in charge of summits at SmashGG after Zoo left in I think January, because he used to be in charge of summits before that. And I took over summits. I had a lot of meetings with the owner of BTS, LD, and Hotbid, and Dan, who all like work over there, and JJ, who's one of the people I work with now. And they all basically like would come to me as the SmashGG rep for summit stuff. And eventually, I think within the confines of those conversations, I learned that they were starting to pick up like other tournaments to be on BTS Smash. And I was like, you guys don't have like a very big network for this. Like, what if you guys contracted me to do some of this for you on the side? And they liked that. And I started to like just reach out to tournaments, because I wanted to give tournaments like a bigger avenue and a bigger channel to be on. And I was like, I can obviously like fill a niche for you guys. And then it kind of came around. I feel comfortable talking about it at this point. It's like, this is also happening at the same time as the never released Omega circuit, which you can think of as Smash World Tour, but it never happened. And it did not come together. That was probably the final nail in the coffin in terms of my motivation at SmashGG. So that project never came together.
This was a program or a project that was being run at SmashGG specifically.
Yeah, like SmashGG was involved in this, as well as other parties. We were basically helping facilitate it. Like, I assume they were going to help facilitate the Smash World Tour, because I think in that announcement they were involved as well. And Omega never came together. And that's a whole topic within itself. I'm not even sure how much of that like I could actually talk about, but I think I'm comfortable saying it existed.
Okay. Whatever you can talk about, man. Give me the tea.
But Omega never came together, and within that instance, it also that also connected me to BTS in a weird way, because like BTS was like not directly involved in that project, but they were like affiliated with it because there was talks of like what channel this circuit was going to be on and blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And between that and what I had offered them, I started talking to just Hotbit and LD and Slime more, just in general about Smash and what I could do for them. And they also opened a project like manager position around that time that I applied for. We kind of like went back and forth on whether they were going to hire that person. They decided not to. And then I think in August, LD called me and was basically like, "Would you want to do X, X, and X and X for us as like a full-time employee?" And it was basically part of what I had already been doing as contract work, like getting streams for them.
Mm-hmm.
But flourished into like some sort of full-time position that was like half that, half project manager. And I was like, "Fuck yeah!" And then I moved down to SoCal in September of 2019 to start the new job.
Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. That's a great, like, that's just a great path. And I was always, like, so happy for you when I saw that. So I remember hearing about you leaving SmashGG. And around that time, a lot of people were leaving too. And
Yeah.
I remember you leaving, and then I was like, and then you were like, shortly after that, you're like, I'm at BTS now. And I was just like, so happy for you for that, because I was like, that's an incredible lateral to just be like, I'm going from, the most prominent Smash, like, or the most prominent organizing website for tournaments, particularly for Smash, to the most prominent content creator for Smash. I just feel like that's an awesome jump.
I was super happy with it because I think like for the negative things that may have been said, SmashGG overall was an experience I look back on with like a lot of nostalgia because everybody who worked there was like so wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a lot of good times together. Like I think like all the people I got to work with and a lot of the things I worked on in the earlier years, I especially like really liked and like was proud of. Um, but I think like as my job strayed further and further away from like tournament organization, not that it was ever focused on that necessarily. I just was like, I really, really want to spend my time more on stuff that's like tournament execution focused. And BTS presented that like wonderful opportunity where it's like now my day to day is more focused on event planning, and that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So it was a really really nice transition. I like couldn't have asked. It really could not have asked for something better that kept me involved in Smash, but also allowed me to do things on the organization front. And I definitely consider myself like very lucky that it all happened to work out that way.
Yeah. Now you also have insight into BTS, which is, in my opinion, something. I mean, I've watched BTS for years. I mean, I followed their Dota stuff, and when they got into Smash, like that was huge. What is the company culture like there, and what's the mission of BTS? Like, if you had to summarize it, because what we know like about BTS is like, okay, they create content
Yeah.
for very select games, which I really like, right? Like the focus is on Dota and Smash, and like those are kind of the two things. And they did Dota until they were doing it incredibly well, and then they branched out into Smash, which I think is like so awesome and such great business acumen to do that and say, we're going to do one thing and we're going to do it really, really well. And then once we're masters at that, we're going to step into this other thing. But like, talk about, if you can, like, talk about like the company culture. How do you guys come up with stuff like Hungry Box singing freaking, singing that one song. I don't even remember but like how
Shallow, I think.
Shallow, yes. Like, how do you come up with Hungry Box doing a version of Shallow, Smash Summit, all of this great content that you guys produce? Because that's something I think that makes the company so unique. Is it's not just, yes, you organize tournaments, two a year on average. Well, obviously, probably more to come, but you provide content, and content is king, in my opinion, especially nowadays.
Yeah. I think it was such an interesting world to walk into because I kind of knew what I was getting into, but like not in full. I think the core at it when it comes to that stuff is the company employs some ridiculously like creative and smart and passionate people. So like just like Anthony Slime left a couple months ago, or what, a month ago? How long has he works for Ludwig now?
Yeah,
For
it's like
those.
6 weeks ago. He's the COO of
Yeah.
Mobile Moves now.
Yeah, but he like for as like silly and like as ridiculous as he is incredibly intelligent, articulate, well-read, like an English major, if you will, like a very well studied one, and it's just a very very good like writer, and like understands like has a really like nuanced understanding of comedy, and if you hang out with that him, you begin to learn his understanding of that. Similarly, I think our head of content Dan is like very similar in that regard. Hotbid, also a well-known like creative and funny person within esports. I think Hotbid, like probably his like, I don't know if his most famous outing, like he did like old StarCraft interviews for Liquipedia that were like pretty
Yeah,
funny back in the
it's
day.
so funny.
And then he did.
It's sorry to interrupt,
Mhm.
but it's so funny hearing Hotbid's name now because my first foray into esports early on in my life was StarCraft.
Yeah.
That looks like a delicious something that someone is making back there in the oven.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my first foray into esports was StarCraft 2, way back in 2007, 2008, right when that, or it's about 2008, 2009 when that game came out, and so I fell
Yeah.
into Team Liquid back when it was just teamliquid.net, and I recognize Hotbid from that era. So it's so funny for me. And there's a
Yeah.
couple of other guys too who have gone into major roles in esports, and I recognize them. So
Yeah, it's wild because he obviously has like a long history, and I think most notably, like I knew of Hotbid before Smash as well from League, because he used to own and operate Esports Express, which was like satirical articles about esports,
mm-hmm.
and it became really popular within the League community, and then like did some Smash stuff later on, but he operated that for a few years, and like that's what I knew Hotbid from. So like, and that was an extremely popular site, like that got like a bunch of funding on Kickstarter. And then I think like otherwise, like other than that, like Envy at Falco on Twitter,
Oh yeah.
who's also my roommate alongside Slime. He is also ridiculously like funny and creative, and just an incredible like artist in like whatever he chooses to do. So it's just like this like, and then Andrew, who's also a part of our content team. He's been like a long time like Dota guy. He's been at like BTS for years. He's also like ridiculously creative and like really technical and like smart in his execution and like how we build sets and like film things. And then we have this unique like production team who like really just gives they just really give a fuck about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And like even when it's like hard and stressful, they want to do it and execute it in like a really like good way. Like so they want it to be good. Like even if it's hard and even when it requires going the extra mile. So it's the brainstorming meetings are honestly like really just like 5 people in a room just shooting shit at a wall
Yeah.
and like seeing what sticks and seeing what people think is funny and kind of acting stuff out. And it's actually been really interesting for me to like sit back and like watch that process and like partake in it to a degree. But I think that's why is like there's just an incredible there's so much talent in that fucking studio, man.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, like most of the people are at home right now, but my point being that like the company has hired an amazing group of people who are just undeniably good at what they do creatively, and that's why everything comes together so well.
That's awesome. Is it privately funded, or it's not like publicly funded the way SmashGG was, right? But there's
No private, yeah, like I guess like private company that I guess it's probably cool to say like we operate at a profit.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
imagine
so
so
it's like,
for how long you guys have been in business. But
yeah.
does the revenue mainly flow from the content creation and the views and the advertising? If you don't mind me asking, like that's something that I'm very personally interested in as a business person.
Yeah, I would say the most important thing, like a lot of esports outings, and I've learned this especially having not removed myself from Smash, but just getting involved in like bigger scenes and games now,
Mm-hmm.
is realizing that like sales is like where a lot of the money is. Like there's a reason why Overwatch League dumped so much money into sales, and like why they made a ridiculous amount of money for that league in comparison to like its viewership against LCS, for instance.
Yeah. So
It's
are you,
like
when you say
Riot.
sales, sorry, when you say sales, are you
Mhm.
talking about like merchandise and that kind of stuff?
Um, no, like sponsors. So
Okay.
a department at your company that goes out and like gets sponsorships and activations from brands.
Okay.
Um, so like Overwatch League, for instance, like had Blizzard apparently has a huge sales team that got them a variety of sponsors for the league itself, got them a gigantic exclusivity deal with Twitch, and then YouTube Now, I think, and then the COD League with YouTube Now. And then, for instance, like Riot, in comparison, to my knowledge, has not invested as much in sales. So even though they have a product that gets a lot more viewers, they're not cranking out the bucks in the same way, or at least they were not in the past, because that sales department wasn't as big. And that's like a lot of, what we have a sales department at our company, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at our Dota and Counter Strike and Smash events, like we have a monster sponsor. We work with like a variety of other people, well, I guess Hitbox comes to mind for Smash.
Hmm.
I think we've worked with like Betway recently, or other like betting sponsors on various like Dota and Counter Strike events here and there. And there's just like a variety of like brands and companies we've had the opportunity to work with. And I think right now esports is like built around that system.
Yes.
And we aren't removed from that. Unfortunately, I think like content is something that when we make a really sick skit about or sketch about Hungry Box, and it gets a shit ton of views, ultimately like the reality is that doesn't make that much money.
Yeah.
But I think you can't leave that by the wayside, because I think that's what brings a lot of the company's identity, like creates the company's identity and like why we're different. And I think that's what you were asking about, like a motto or like a mantra of like what the company is about. And I think it's in a world of like very I would say vanilla and like static esports companies, I think we bring a lot of personality and flavor and different things to the table for especially communities like Dota and Counter-Strike, where events are often like very buttoned up and like
Hmm.
and not strict exactly, but very like professional and matching of traditional sports in a lot of ways, where we tend to differ, and we provide that sort of like relaxed environment where I think in Smash in a lot of ways we sort of set the tone, but in those other communities we like have differentiated ourselves from what the standard is rather, and that we carve out our own like sense of personality in a way that a lot of other companies do not. And I think that's like something really unique and powerful about what we do. And some part of the reason like why I'm really proud and like happy to work there is because like I work for a company that cares about that stuff and doing things like authentically and like in a cool way, and I'm surrounded by people that also care about those sort of things, and that that shows in like the events and like the content that is produced.
Yeah. Authenticity is so important, and that's something that I've thought a lot about when it comes to content. And it, in particular with Smash, I think, but in esports in general, it is the brands that are the most authentic that are the most successful. Um,
Yeah,
and I think,
dude, I actually think it's so funny that you say something about this, because we talk about this shit in our house all the time. Like we I think we just like we shoot the shit about like esports and just what goes on and like what we think of like how certain things are being handled, blah blah blah. We started talking about authenticity in the car on the way to our Starbucks the other day, and I was saying that I feel like in a way, like if you're willing to take the time as a brand, like authenticity actually isn't that hard to access. You just have to work with the right people and the core people from that community. And I think a good example of that is actually Red Bull, where they don't like get too overwhelming in like the planning of something. They
mhm,
don't try to like carve it like a community into something that it isn't. They're like, hey, how can we like get involved and support this like cool thing that you guys do, and we will be your partner in making this like product like sick. And
yeah,
like I think Red Bull actually does like a cool job of that. I think that's like what they've done. Like I think what sticks out in my mind actually is like all the extreme sports stuff that Red Bull does.
mhm.
It's funny because like that's beyond esports. Like I guess like, but that's what I also always associate Red Bull with is their extreme sports activation. because like those events seem so authentic and raw, and the participants like seem so happy to be a part of them, and Red Bull just gets to be associated with that cool thing.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely the experience we had with them, working with them on Mango Axe Live back in November of last year.
Yeah.
It was so much about just like, let's get Mango, let's get Axe, let's put them in this venue in downtown Phoenix. Let's invite anybody who wants to come. It's totally free.
Yeah.
Bring everybody in and let's just have fun. And they took the Mango Axe dynamic, which you normally only see on Twitch, and brought it to a live forum, and then also had a tournament. And the tournament itself was like not very serious. It was all random characters, all random stages.
Yeah.
And so like that, again, that kind of authenticity really shone there, where it was like, yes, we're Red Bull Esports, but we're not going to show up and spend $50,000 on this big event and then be pissed at you guys when you don't show. Right?
Yeah.
Like we're gonna show up and do something really fun, and then we'll be associated with this really fun thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can see, I think their event, the Gods and Gatekeepers, is a good example of that too, where it's like they tried to do something unique. They tried to do something that stood out, that was different, it was memorable, and it was cool. And there are other companies that do this as well. They are not alone, but they're just an example that stick out in my mind because of like what I've seen them do. It's like not impossible for these brands to have authentic activations, and I think that's what we do with all of our partners that we have. Is when we work with somebody, I think we work really hard to make sure that we do something really unique and creative for them, like the ads that we created for Sennheiser, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Like those Sennheiser ads we've done are basically sketches in their own right. And I think they're extra memorable because like we took the same like creative care with those that we did with just a sketch that isn't associated with a brand at all.
Yeah. Okay, we're past 90 minutes. I know you want to try to keep it in that time frame, but I got to ask one more thing.
Good.
See, this is why I planned for 3 hours, because I feel like we could go all night. But
yeah, no, it can definitely. I kind of said 90 minutes with an idea in mind that it would probably pass that. So
okay, so last thing I wanted to ask you about is the BTS Slippi League that you guys just announced. So for one thing, super exciting. Just in general. Really awesome, unique idea that I think is going to be really incredible and focuses on something that I think, and Taylor and I were discussing this on the last episode of the podcast. He's my broadcast director, and he was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. But we were talking about storylines and how important storylines are, and we feel that leagues in particular have the opportunity to tell really interesting stories, and so I'm very excited for the upcoming Slippi League, because we're going to get to see a lot of these storylines, and it's going to be able to be done safe from home, and I'm very excited about it. So tell me about the project, the genesis of it, and what you're hoping for from it as it progresses.
Sure. So I think just to start with the origins of it, it's like pretty simple. This year, obviously pretty rough for in-person Smash events. It slowed down a lot of what we had planned for the year, so we were interested in doing online events in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Then, God in heaven, Jazz releases rollback, and it changes everything. And after Jazz, prior to the release, we had been talking to him for a while just about like what was going to happen and what it was going to be like. Had the opportunity to like test it out. I was like, this is going to be, I mean, if I may, it's going to be absolutely fucked when it comes out. And it was. And it was so huge. So huge. And Jazz, like after launching it and having a lot of, I think the success of it scaled way beyond what he expected. He thought it would be a big deal, but, not quite what it ended up delivering.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I want to, this is part of what I promised. I want to start giving back. And he basically came to us with like a proposal to do an official partnered tournament and league, and was like, I'll put money up for the prize pool. I'll like help contribute and like advertise, because this is like, it's not just about me. It's like I care about this community, which nobody would spend 6 months working on this if they didn't give a shit about Melee. It's so he came to us, and then we started working on this, like probably, I would say seriously, in like May. with an expectation of that it would come around in August. Moved back a little further than that, as things do. And we've been working on it since then. And it finally, we finally were able to announce it. Hotbid, I think Hotbid actually did a lot of the work on the format that we ended up choosing, which is something that stands out as unique. I think it's a lot of like opportunity to showcase an interesting format and matches that don't normally come in like a traditional bracket structure.
Yeah.
And overall, I'm just like ridiculously excited to like announce the players this week for one. That's going to happen at the end of this week. And then just get this thing started, because I think it's going to be the first tournament that feels like an in-person tournament since COVID started. We're doing things with like the broadcast to make sure this like very much stands out as unique. We're treating this like we do like our online Dota events. So the casters will be in studio.
Nice.
So we'll have like a physical set with people in person casting the games. And we'll have people like present. I think we're integrating webcams into the overlays. So we have actual like player cams on the overlays and things like that. Going the extra mile to make sure that we deliver a product that captures the spirit of like what an in-person tournament would be.
Yeah.
So hoping that all comes together nicely. The first event is going to happen. I think we're going to have it announced this week. The first open qualifier will be October 3rd, and then the first league day will be October 11th.
Nice. So where are you guys kind of hoping to go? Like, what are you hoping? Like, what's the objective of the league, and what are you guys hoping ultimately results from it in the long run?
I think there isn't like a huge there isn't like this huge overarching plan to it. I think the loose idea is like we're testing the waters with a new online product. This isn't like a Smash Summit. We haven't made some huge endeavor into online matchmaking since the pandemic started, and we just kind of want to see how this goes. And then if it does go well, I think this is something that's easy to pivot into like a second season.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we're keeping in mind, is like, can we run a second season of this? And also, does it prove that Smash can still have big events and big viewership in an online environment? Because I mean, referencing the few online majors that have happened, I would say other than Ludwig's tournament, nothing has really grazed numbers of what close to a LAN major would get. So
Yeah.
I think people are a little tentative of like dropping resources into things that might not pan out. Some other tournaments have cracked like the 10,000 mark, but I think Ludwig's was the only one that's like broken like 20K. He broke 30K, but I think that's the only one that's broken like 20K in viewers.
Yeah.
So it's this question of like, can this product be successful? And will it drive like the same attention and appreciation that a typical like LAN event would? Because Smash is a huge part of the company's identity at this point. I think like Dota is like the core, and like all the OG people that started at the company are like from Dota. But as the company has branched out, I think Smash is a big part of the company's identity, as is I would say Counter-Strike as well at this point. And I think we see it as, it's not just about like some budget sheet for this specific event. It's like we need to have like an event in Smash still if all of our normal ones are canceled. Like we need to do something in this era of like canceled events, because it's important to the people that work there. Like I literally work there because of this game. I want to get something out. And Hotbid, I know Hotbid feels the same way. Like Hotbid's played Melee since, for people don't know, Hotbid's played Melee since like 2005. So it's he among other people at the company like care a lot about getting something out there. And I think that's probably the main thing. It's like we want to do something, we want to test the waters, and then if it goes well, then we can build off of it like really easily. And then if it doesn't go well, what it means is probably we'll iterate on the project more. I don't think it means like, oh well, never doing an online Smash event. It means more like, well, we need to think a little bit more about like how we're going to approach this.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think 2021 looks like? So it's September now.
Yeah.
The hope and the dream was that we might be able to host some kind of in-person events again in October. That definitely is not happening. There is unlikely to be any in-person events for the rest of 2020, and definitely no majors nothing big, not even for us, no ascensions. What do you think 2021 looks like, and how long do you think it is going to be before you guys are comfortable hosting the next, the next BTS tournament?
So, as far as BTS planning goes, the first in-person event we have planned for 2021 doesn't happen until June. And I think that's the general expectation, is that things probably won't be okay to host anything until like at the earliest then.
Yeah.
There's some pretty I think we've discussed internally, and I'm sure people can just like read online, like read what people who specialize in this sort of thing like are estimating, and it honestly doesn't sound like it's going to be that good until mid next year.
Yeah.
And that's like if some miraculously a vaccine comes out like sooner than expected, and there's mass vaccinations and things become safer than you would expect, fantastic. And then maybe I'm sure other people will try to spin stuff up. But I think that's kind of the timeline we're all working on in our head, is like I don't see a world where like Q1 of next year is good. I
Yeah.
think the earliest is like Q2, Q3 of next year, where things start being normal again. I think it's like, your expectations like just can't be too high with this thing.
Will we see a Smash Summit before then? Do you think it's possible? Like, assume you get everyone in, you you bubble them, you NBA style. Everyone gets a COVID test. Everyone gets locked in, in the BTS facility. Is it possible? Your silence is giving up the game.
I will say that Smash Summit will happen before then. I can't say whether the players will be in the studio or not. So I would keep that in mind. I think Smash Summit will happen before we have a full in-person event again. But I don't know. I don't know if NBA bubble is the way we can let it ride yet. We will see. I don't think we'll. I think it's unlikely we would go with that approach, but I can say there will be a summit.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. You heard it here first.
Yeah,
Smash Summit.
So
it's going to happen
sometime
sometime in the next 9 months.
Yes. No dates yet. I think it's fair to tease that there will be an announcement, like soon TM about that. So
okay. Yeah.
Something to look forward to. And
yeah.
I think it'll be really good, and I think it'll help fill, similar to the league itself. I think it'll help fill kind of this hole that we have for events right now, and hopefully tide people over until other people can kind of take up the mantle of normal in-person majors again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. We blew past the time. Oh, not super bad, but we should definitely call it. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and do this. It was really nice to get to know you better and actually have like a really nice long conversation. After running into each other at a couple events, I always had a lot of respect for you as a TO, and you're someone who, remotely we've worked very closely over the last couple of years, especially just, I think thinking about ideas of, what's best for the community, what the next steps are, where the future lies. So I'm tremendous respect for you, and I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks so much, Steven. I honestly super appreciate it. I thought it was really cool that you reached out. I think likewise, like there's a lot of mutual respect, because I think you do a lot of things like incredibly well with SAK Gaming, and Arizona has always been like a community to admire, in my opinion. So it's really cool to just talk to you more. Like you said, I feel like a lot of our interactions over the years are like very like TO focused and utilitarian, and we get to just kind of do work sort of stuff in passing because of the space between us. But it's nice to talk about stuff in a more personal way, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because we'll run into each other in major. Usually we're both drunk, and they're like, "Man, we got to sit down and talk sometime."
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely, dude. That's a classic. That's an absolute classic.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and that's it. Bye, everybody.